My boyfriend knocked up my best friend. The text message came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. I remember because I was lying awake, wondering why Jake hadn't come home yet, when my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "You deserve to know. Check the photos." The attached images shattered my world in high definition. Jake and Mia, my boyfriend of 4 years, and my best friend since college, tangled together in what was unmistakably her apartment bedroom. The timestamp showed they were taken just hours earlier. I sat in the darkness of our shared apartment, scrolling through evidence of a betrayal so complete it felt like drowning. When Jake finally stumbled through the door at 4 a.m., reeking of her perfume, I was already packed. "Lila, what's going on?" He squinted at my suitcases in the hallway, his guilt written across his face in the pale morning light. "How long?" My voice was steady, which surprised us both. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "I don't know what you're—" "How long?" 2 years. The words came out as a whisper. "God, Lila, I'm so sorry. It just happened, and then it kept happening, and—" I held up my hand. 2 years. 2 years of lies. Of double dates where they probably exchanged secret glances. Of girls' nights where Mia listened to me gush about our future while carrying his child. Because that's what the anonymous messenger had also revealed. Mia was 3 months pregnant. "Don't call me," I said, shouldering my bag. "Don't text me. Don't try to explain. We're done." "Lila, please." But I was already walking out the door of that life and into whatever came next. What came next was brutal. I crashed on my sister's couch for 2 months, crying through a steady diet of ice cream and true crime documentaries. My phone buzzed constantly with calls from Jake and Mia that I never answered. After the 15th voicemail from Mia, sobbing about how sorry she was and how she never meant for this to happen, I changed my number. The hardest part wasn't losing Jake. It was losing the version of myself that had believed in us. I'd been so sure he was my person, so confident in our shared future of Sunday morning farmers markets and kitchen renovations, and eventually, kids with his dark eyes and my stubborn chin. That certainty had been my anchor, and without it, I felt completely untethered. But slowly, painfully, I began to rebuild. I'd always been passionate about environmental policy, but Jake had convinced me it was impractical, that I should stick with my stable but soul-crushing job in corporate communications. Without his voice in my ear, I dusted off my graduate school applications. At 28, I felt ancient walking onto campus for my first day of graduate school, but the coursework energized me in a way I'd forgotten was possible. My advisor, Dr. Chen, was a firecracker of a woman who'd spent decades fighting for sustainable urban development. She took me under her wing, introducing me to a world of passionate, brilliant people who cared about the same things I did. For the first time in years, I felt useful. 6 months into the program, Dr. Chen recommended me for an internship with the state's environmental agency. It was there, in a conference room that smelled of burnt coffee and ambition, that I met David. He was the complete opposite of Jake in every way that mattered. Where Jake was all charm and easy smiles, David was quietly thoughtful, the kind of person who listened more than he spoke. Where Jake talked big dreams but never followed through, David had spent the last decade building clean water infrastructure in rural communities. Where Jake was still, at 29, trying to figure himself out, David knew exactly who he was and what he wanted. Our first conversation lasted 3 hours. We were supposed to be discussing my research proposal, but somehow we ended up talking about everything. Our childhoods, our dreams, the books that had shaped us. When I finally looked at my watch, the sun was setting. "I should go," I said, suddenly aware that we were the only ones left in the building. "Yeah," he said, but neither of us moved. "Would you maybe want to grab dinner sometime? Somewhere that serves better coffee than this place?" I said yes before I could overthink it. Dating David felt like learning a new language. The language of mutual respect, of partnership, of someone who saw my dreams as valid and important. He never once suggested I was being impractical or naive. Instead, he introduced me to policymakers and activists, included me in conversations about projects I was passionate about, celebrated every small victory in my graduate program like it was his own. When I got the job offer, a position with the state's Renewable Energy Task Force, he was the first person I called. "Lila, that's incredible!" His voice crackled through the phone from the field site where he was working. "I'm so proud of you." Proud of me. Jake had never once said he was proud of me. "I love you," I blurted out, then immediately felt my cheeks burn. We'd been dating for 8 months, but neither of us had said it yet. "I love you too," he said softly. "I have for months." We were married 18 months later in a small ceremony in Dr. Chen's backyard, surrounded by friends who loved us for who we actually were, not who they wanted us to be. My sister cried through the entire ceremony. "You're glowing," she whispered as she hugged me afterward. "You look like yourself again." 2 years into marriage, I was finally pregnant. We'd been trying for 6 months, and when the test showed 2 pink lines, I sat on our bathroom floor and cried happy tears. David found me there and immediately started crying too. "Are you happy?" I asked, suddenly worried. "I'm terrified," he said, pulling me into his arms, "and completely happy." I was 12 weeks along when it happened. David and I were grocery shopping on a Saturday morning, debating whether to buy organic apples or save the money for the nursery fund, when I heard a familiar laugh. My blood turned to ice. Jake was at the other end of the produce section, looking harried and older than his 31 years. He was pushing a cart with a fussy toddler while Mia trailed behind, her face pinched with exhaustion and frustration. "Told you we needed the name brand diapers," she was saying, her voice sharp with the particular irritation of a couple who'd stopped pretending to like each other. "But you never listen." "They're twice the price, Mia. We can't afford anything because you quit another job," she snapped. "God, sometimes I wonder what I ever saw in you." The toddler, their child, I realized with a start, began crying louder. Jake looked like he wanted to cry too. I should have turned around, should have grabbed David's hand and walked away. But some masochistic part of me was frozen, watching this train wreck of the life I thought I wanted. That's when Jake looked up and saw me. His face went through a series of expressions: surprise, shame, something that might have been longing. "Lila?" Mia's head whipped around, and I saw her take in my appearance. The professional clothes, the confident posture, the way David's hand automatically came to rest protectively on my lower back. "Oh," she said quietly. "Hi." "Hello," I said calmly. David squeezed my hand, a silent question, and I squeezed back. "I'm okay." Jake was staring at us, and I could see him trying to piece together the obvious. Is this your husband?" "Yes," David said easily, extending his free hand. "David Martinez. Nice to meet you." Jake shook it automatically, still looking stunned. He trailed off, apparently unable to figure out how to introduce himself. "You look good, Lila," Mia said suddenly. "Really good. Are you still doing the communications thing?" "Environmental policy," I corrected. "I work for the state now. Renewable energy development." "Wow," Jake said. That's great. That's what you always wanted to do." The toddler was still crying, and Mia looked like she was at the end of her rope. "We should go," she said to Jake. "Emma needs her nap." Emma. They'd named their daughter Emma. "Yeah, of course," Jake said, but he was still looking at me with something I couldn't quite identify. Regret, maybe, or recognition of what he'd lost. "It was good to see you both," I said, and meant it. Not good in a way that made me want to reconnect, but good in a way that felt like closure. "I hope you're happy." As we walked away, I heard Mia hiss, "Could you try not to stare at your ex-girlfriend in front of our daughter?" "I wasn't staring," Jake protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "Well, what's done is done," David said quietly once we were out of earshot. "You okay?" I considered the question seriously. 2 years ago, seeing them would have shattered me all over again. But now, watching their obvious unhappiness, their exhaustion, the way they spoke to each other with barely concealed resentment, I felt something I hadn't expected. Gratitude. "Actually," I said, placing my hand over my still small bump, "I think I'm better than okay." David smiled and kissed my temple. "Good, because we have a nursery to plan." As we finished our shopping, I thought about the strange mathematics of heartbreak, how what had felt like the end of everything had actually been the beginning of the life I was supposed to have, how betrayal had forced me to rebuild myself stronger, more authentic, more sure of what I actually wanted. At the checkout, the cashier smiled at us. "When are you due?" she asked, nodding at my hand resting on my belly. "February," I said, feeling David's pride radiate beside me. First baby? Yes, David answered, his voice warm with anticipation. We're pretty excited. As we walked to the car, arms linked, talking about baby names and nursery colors, I caught a glimpse of Jake loading groceries while Mia strapped a screaming Emma into her car seat. They weren't talking to each other. I didn't feel sorry for them exactly. They'd made their choices. But I didn't feel vindicated either. What I felt was grateful. Grateful that their betrayal had forced me to leave a life that was wrong for me and find one that was exactly right. What are you thinking about? David asked as we pulled out of the parking lot. Just everything, I said, watching Jake's car disappear in the rearview mirror. How sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing. Are you talking about meeting me? He asked with mock seriousness. I laughed, among other things. Good, he said, reaching over to take my hand, because I was starting to take it personally. As we drove home to our little house with the sunny kitchen and the garden David had planted for me, I thought about how revenge was supposed to work. You were supposed to plot and scheme, to actively work toward your enemy's downfall. But the best revenge, I'd learned, was simply living well. It was becoming the person you were always meant to be, loving someone who saw your worth, building a life that made you proud. The best revenge was happiness. And God, was I happy?